Hey, Ecommerce Marketing Podcast listener, are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own referral program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast, everyone. I am your host, Arlen Robinson, and today we have a very special guest, Jordan West, who is a multi-brand and agency owner who loves growing brands and seeing founders thrive. Welcome to the podcast, Jordan.
Arlen, thanks so much for having me. You have a great radio voice, by the way.
Oh, thanks a lot.
It's just so natural, and it's great. So, thanks for having me.
No problem. Well, I appreciate that compliment on the radio voice. I've heard that before. I believe me, it's not all me. I get that from my dad. My dad has a very deep baritone voice. People have always told him he should have done voiceover work. He never did, but he was an English professor. Also was in the theater arts. He produced plays and was in that arena. So I get that from him. But yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, maybe in another life I'll have to explore that. You never know.
Absolutely. Yes, you definitely should.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see what happens. Well, great. Well, I'm definitely excited to talk to you. Today's topic is something I never really got into before in this podcast. So I'm super excited to talk about it. We're going to be talking about the gated launch method, and really what that is and how any to be successful with it. So super excited to get into that and dive deep. But before we do get into all of that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and specifically how you did get in what you're doing today?
Yeah, totally. So when it was either 22 or 23 years old, I should really actually nail down when that was. I decided to buy a Mexican chain restaurant. So I found the name was Taco Del Mar. I found out that they were for sale, this one particular store. There was actually a few of them for sale. I'm like, what's going on? And it seems so cheap. I think I ended up buying it for like $35,000. And I was like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? Like I lose $35,000. I mean, at 22 or 23, that was a lot of money.
Right. But
I was like, this would be a good learning experience. Well, I mean, it ended up being probably closer to about $150,000 that I lost, and about 5 years of my time trying to run the store, trying to make money. We ended up tripling the sales throughout that. That was the one thing I was really good at, was pushing sales. I'm like, okay, like I think I get this whole marketing thing. Facebook was just starting to introduce some of their marketing, so we started to use Facebook a little bit. And then in there, we had our first child, my wife and I. Okay. My wife was a fashion designer, and so she realized that there was a need for leggings that went over top of cloth diapers. So we were trying cloth diapering with our first child, and she's like, I just can't find anything that really fits. So she just took a pattern, made it a little bit different, and people loved them. They're like, whoa, can I buy some of these? And then we went to markets, and we ended up starting on Etsy. And we got our first wholesale order, and then fast forward now, that brand is now actually 3 brands. And we'll probably be close to 8 figures this year in sales. And then from there, we've just started to acquire other brands and continue to grow that way. And then in the midst of all of that, the one thing that I was really good at was the marketing side again. So people started to come to me for marketing advice, and we ended up starting an agency. So that was about 3 years ago now, and we've grown that into a pretty substantial business in itself. So that's sort of where we're at right now. Continually, I think I've got 2 or 3 pretty serious acquisition conversations going on right now, and that's sort of where I'm at right now.
Okay, great. Sounds good. That's quite a history there. It seems like, and that takes a lot to dive deep into the restaurant business at such a young age. You mentioned purchasing the Mexican restaurant, and it seems like you were all in at that point. I've heard a lot about restaurants and what it takes to manage them and grow them, and I think you probably learned, from the School of Hard Knocks, going through that experience as far as what it took to market the business, sell, and, keep it going for it. You said you had that going for about 6 years.
Yeah, I think it was about five years that I was in there. And it's really interesting, right? Because you learn a lot of things that, what you're good at, what you're not good at. For me, I'm horrible at operations. Gotcha. I can't be that operational person. If I did, I just would never succeed in anything. So finding that out early was a good thing. It was definitely worth all of that learning. Even that $150,000, it's an expensive MBA, but
right.
but it's one that I have now.
Yeah, definitely. But that's a great way to look at it. It really was like a real world MBA experience, rather than going to school. I mean, you learned with boots on the ground, and that's really the best way to learn, no matter what it is you're doing. So,
absolutely.
Great to hear that. Well, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, of course, today we're going to be talking about the gated launch method. And so our listeners may not really be familiar with that. So why don't you tell us exactly what that is?
Yeah, totally. So before I talk about the gated launch method, what I want to talk about is what you need to have before you try the gated launch method. So first of all, the two big things that I am harping on big time in 2021 right now are SMS lists, so text message lists, and VIP groups. So let's start with VIP groups first, right? So VIP groups are incredible because what they do is they aggregate your best customers. I'm sure that most people who are listening to this kind of know the levels of traffic. So, level 1 are people who have never heard about you before. Level 2 are people who have engaged with your brand in some sort of way. Level 3, they've actually looked at a product. Level 4, they've added to cart in some way. And then level 5 are people who have actually made their first purchase. Well, it goes way beyond that afterwards, right? There's level 6, 7, 8. What we're really looking for are those 6, 7, and 8 people, right? Those people who are going to become brand advocates, right? They're going to actually do the customer service for you. And the way that you get them to do that is aggregate them in a group where they can talk amongst each other, right? So that's why I love VIP groups so much. So we have our VIP groups on Facebook, just because the algorithm is very kind to Facebook groups right now, especially if you have an active Facebook group. And it has been for years now. It's been very kind to those groups. So we aggregate people in that group and then give them special privileges to be in that group. The real key to all of this success, so we tried the gated launch, and I'll explain the gated launch in a minute. We tried it before we actually had an SMS list, and it was okay. But really what ended up happening and really leading to a lot of success was when we paired the gated launch, our VIP group alongside of our SMS list, right? And treated them both like VIPs. That's when things really went crazy. So let me walk you through exactly what a gated launch looks like. So first of all, we go to our website, and 12 to 24 hours before, we actually password protect the site and let people know. So 2 weeks before, we're letting people know, hey, we're going to be doing this big launch. We're going to be either having a sale or we're going to be doing a launch. So the one in particular that I'll talk about was one that we did in 24 hours. We did $250,000 of sales with no discounts. There was no ads, nothing like that. So it was really like an incredible launch in that 24 hours. So, 2 weeks before, we're letting people know, like, hey, this is what we're releasing. We're showing them a lookbook of everything. And then 12 to 24 hours before, we end up password protecting the site and let people know, if you want early access, you need to join this group or join our SMS list. And so we get tons of signups throughout that. Then at 10 a.m. Pacific, we end up releasing the password, right? So 2 hours before everybody else gets access. And it was absolute mayhem on this one. I started to look at Google Analytics, and it was like 500 people on the site, 1,000 people on the site, 3,000, 4,000 people on the site. And it's just absolutely crazy. In that first 2 hours while the site was gated, we did 120,000 in sales.
Wow.
And this is no discounts, right? This is no sale. This is just releasing new product. So really absolutely incredible. There's a lot of like psychology that goes behind this too, right? Entering that password is that little micro commitment that you're making when you're getting into the site. And I think that that's really important. There's a huge part of that. Rather than just telling them, hey, there's early access, we're actually password protecting the site. So they know nobody else can get in. It's only them who have the password who can actually get into the site. So it really gives them that sort of VIP experience.
Gotcha. Yeah, really interesting. What I've seen from everything that you're telling me, that is it. I think there really, really is a whole psychology behind it, because it's the thing of makes whatever it is that you're offering more just of an exclusive offering. And, it's something that only a certain amount of people can get. these days, everybody wants to be a VIP. Everybody wants exclusive access. Everybody wants to get a little bit extra, a little bit more than the next person. I think that goes a lot into why you were so successful and why a lot of brands are successful doing this, particular type of method. Now you mentioned using, Facebook groups and groups where you created the actual kind of VIP area. Why is it that you mentioned that you really love Facebook with it and the algorithms work well with it? Why is it that Facebook has such a platform where the facilitation of these groups is so good now? And is there any other options outside of Facebook that you would recommend?
Totally. There's lots of other options, right? So you've got Slack, you've got Discord, anywhere where you can like aggregate people together, right? Mm-hmm. The reason why I love Facebook is because everybody goes onto Facebook every day, right?
Right.
So whereas people don't necessarily, unless you're in the business world, you don't necessarily go check Slack every day. Mm-hmm. Right? Like I do, obviously, like I have like 8 Slack groups that I'm a part of, but not everybody does that, right? And customers don't necessarily go check Slack, whereas they do for Facebook, right? It's just a great way. And Facebook, I mean, seeing some of the recent updates, they're really trying to push groups, even more so. They're trying to have groups even off of Facebook. I saw this recent interesting update that they're trying to aggregate and be able to host a group not necessarily just on Facebook, but off of Facebook using Facebook's platform. So to me, that's the win right there, is still using their platform. Yes, it's, the argument is like, well, you're kind of renting that space there, right? Or I mean, it's not even rented because you're not paying for it at all, besides through advertisements. But I still prefer that over a Slack group, which would be a little bit more owned.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense. And I've had experiences with both the Facebook groups and the Slack groups. And, I think the win with the Facebook is you already have people's attention is already going to be there. People go there. They're frequently checking their timelines. They're already kind of in other communities there. And it's
totally,
a little bit easier to participate. With Slack, it's definitely doable. I've been in some successful Slack groups, but it requires a little bit more of a buy-in, a little bit of things that you got to do to get to it in order to communicate with the people that are in the group. So definitely see how both of those are viable options as far as creating this whole exclusive community. Now, I know one of the questions that a lot of our e-commerce listeners, the business owners and marketers are wondering is, okay, you mentioned it for the example that you gave and the businesses that you've had experience with, but is this gated method something that literally any e-commerce brand can take advantage of and get value from it? What is your take on that?
No, I don't think that it is. I don't think that it works for people who don't have a brand, right? If you don't have a brand and a loyal following, you're not going to be able to do that, right? If you're just trying to drive, cold traffic from Facebook to make a buck, this is not for you, right? If you have a brand and a loyal following, 100%, right? But if you're just selling products or drop shipping and that sort of thing, I don't think that this is the kind of method for you necessarily. You really need to commit to brand, right? And commit to people actually loving what you do so that whatever you put out, they're going to buy, right? Because they trust you that much. So you need to really have built that, like we call it, with our kids, like we call it like the trust tower, right? You've got to build that trust tower up with your customers. So if you haven't done that, this method will not work. You might get like a little bump. Maybe you'll get like $5,000 in sales or something. Maybe.
I see.
But it's not going to do the kind of numbers that we're talking about here, and it's not going to have that same sort of VIP effect.
Gotcha. So if you're let's say a startup brand, fresh out of the gate, no pun intended, and you have no customers, no following, this really wouldn't be the move for you as far as using this kind of method, because you have no community really.
Totally. So I would start with building the community and building your SMS list. Once you have that to like say 1,000 people on each of those lists, go for it. Right. Okay. If people are joining your community and your community is working really well, somebody in my mastermind yesterday was saying they just started their community about a week ago and they already have 400 people in there. And for him, that's awesome. That they're totally going to be able to do a gated launch at some point here pretty quick. And their community is really, really active right now. And so that's really where you're trying to set this foundation in the community.
I see.
Yeah, that's really, really important.
Gotcha. Now, one of the things, because of course you mentioned the popularity of all of these groups, we have the Facebook groups, the Slack groups, there's all of these different communities online, especially nowadays more than ever. There's so many virtual communities that people can participate in. And so naturally, with all of these options out there, people's attention, can be somewhat scattered, and spread between a lot of other things that they're looking at, that they're participating in. When we have these communities and you're preparing a gated launch, how do you, I guess you could say, rally the troops prior to this particular launch? And how do you start, honing in on them, getting their attention, increasing the engagement? What are some specific tactics to do that?
Totally. So through all channels that you have with your customers, I recommend telling them about this launch, right? So email, SMS, your Instagram pages, your Facebook pages, let your customers know that you're going to be doing this and that they have an opportunity to join. And then also within the VIP group, right? So something that's worked well for years, and I don't anticipate not working well anytime soon, is running contests before. So running contests to get the word out that you're going to be doing this. Anytime you run a contest, you're going to get a lot more reach. So running a contest specifically on Instagram is probably a great idea. Within your Facebook VIP group as well, running a contest. There's some really cool ways that you can get people to check their email as well, right? To get that email open rate up using your Facebook VIP group and pushing them over into email as well. So really just cross-pollinating all of those places that your customers hang out.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's what I've seen a lot of other brands do. I participate in a lot of different online course groups and get some education from different online courses, and they follow that methodology. When they're about to launch something exclusive, I see that they hit it out on all of their channels. They create a anticipation, and there's a build up into to it, and then that really kind of gets people's attention. And so, all channels, even if, you have have a podcast, that's also a great way to
totally,
get the word out and then build the anticipation for that. Now, I know, of course, you were very successful with the various gated launches that you did, and I know you learned a lot of lessons, but from the things that you did, what are a couple of the things, mistakes that you made when doing one that you definitely would never do again, but you really learned a lot from that particular mistake?
In gated launches particularly?
Correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great question. I think the biggest mistake that we've made is not telling people enough about it before, right? Just expecting that, we do a quick launch and gate it and that our customers are just going to show up, right? People need that anticipation. So we've had a few flops where we didn't properly let people know weeks in advance that we were going to be doing this. And that was because we didn't want to cannibalize sales before, right?
Okay.
So I don't recommend necessarily doing it for a sale. I don't think that always works the best way. I recommend doing it for new product launches, for sure, new line launches. All of that works really, really well. But for sales, it doesn't necessarily work the same way unless you're okay with cannibalizing your sales.
I see. Yeah, that's great advice, because that was one of the things actually I was wondering. I don't know if I've seen many cases of that where somebody does a kind of a launch or a case for a particular sale, or I know one of the big things these days in e-commerce businesses is these bundles where e-commerce businesses are selling a particular product or even service, will bundle, products together, sell it at an exclusive price, and maybe include, kind of a bonus item. Is something like that worth doing a gated launch for? If it's, it's the same products, but they're just bundled, and then maybe you do some special add-on to it. Would that be effective?
Totally. I would definitely do that. And we in fact are going to be launching something like that next week. So, and we will do a gated launch for it. So absolutely love the bundle idea. There's so much that you can do with those bundles, right? That works so well. So yes, I definitely recommend doing a gated launch for bundles for sure.
Okay. That sounds good. Now, as we get ready to wrap things up, I'm always looking for getting examples of other companies that are successful in specific methods. So what are some other companies that you're familiar with, that you've dealt with, or just in general, that have launched some products using the gated launch method, and what specifically did they do to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I haven't seen many people doing it yet. So I've been talking about it for a while now. Interestingly, on the Shopify Plus community, people are asking about it, and I think that they've heard the sort of success that we've had with these launches. I got the idea from a book called Contagious by Jonah Berger. Awesome book. I got the idea because a fashion brand, really struggling fashion brand years ago, they just were not getting enough sales. Their conversion rate was really low. So what they decided to do was, instead of continuing to sell the normal way, they just password protected their site at all times. And then Friday at 9 a.m., they would release the password and people would come and they'd end up selling out of everything. And it was all the same product. It was the exact same product. It was just, it put that FOMO in there and it put those ideas. So great book. If you guys want to read Contagious by Jonah Berger, really good example in there of people who have done it. And that's where I got the idea from. Okay,
gotcha. Yeah, it's very interesting. So you said they password protected their site just from day one, and then just created that anticipation. The whole thing was always just going to be something exclusive, and you have to sign up. You got to be part of the community. You got to get in order to get access. Very, very interesting. Yeah, so that's definitely a different model. And I guess you could say that you are going that route. You are taking somewhat of a gamble though on it, because you are gambling a little bit on the fact that you are going to get enough people to see the value in it and to want to participate in this, kind of take that little extra step to be part of the community, sign up, whatever they have to do to be part of that group, rather than opening it up to the whole world and, just trying to drive sales and traffic the traditional routes. So it definitely is a bit of a gamble there.
Totally. And we do both, right? Like I think that the way that they're doing it is scary, but has seemed to work. Right. Yeah. So that's all I got to say about that.
All right, gotcha. Yeah. Whatever works, and it's the type of thing where, you can try things and, you can definitely pivot. It's just, the only issue with going that route is if they were to fail initially with it, I don't know. It's just, sometimes it can be hard to recover from something like that, especially if you've kind of already gotten your brand out there a little bit, you launched it as an exclusive, and then you totally pivot from that. Then, I always wonder, doing a big pivot like that with the way that you are getting your brand out there, does that kind of taint your brand in the eyes of the consumer a little bit, especially those that are a little bit more savvy about it? So
it's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah. So I guess that's just a risk you have to take. But, from the most part, it seems like, going this route, you can definitely be successful with it for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely awesome talking to you, Jordan. I've learned a ton about this. Like you said, there's not enough brands using this specific gated launch method, but I think we are going to start seeing a lot more businesses doing it. As you mentioned, Facebook is definitely a great platform for creating an exclusive group, a VIP group. Of course, it's free. It seems like, from what you're saying, they're doing a lot of things to even make it available, not even within their platform. So that speaks volumes to what they're, banking on. They know that this is something that can be huge, in the near future for sure. So it is great to know things like that. But yeah, lastly, before we let you go, I'm always interested to pick my guest's brain a little bit about something where we can kind of switch gears. And if you don't mind enlightening us on one closing fun fact about yourself that you think our listeners would be interested to know about you.
Sure. So I was, up until March the 3rd, I was a paramedic for 12 years.
Oh, wow.
So throughout all business, I also did that.
Okay.
I finally got to the point where I'd gone down to casual for a long time. And it got to the point during COVID where I was like, no, Nope.
Okay.
I can't do this anymore. I just can't I can't dress in all of the PPE and all of that and, be yelled at and peed on. And it was just, I'd done it. I put in my time.
Okay, gotcha. Wow, that is impressive, man. So you said for about 12 years, up until this past March, you were a paramedic on the side, aside from your various e-commerce ventures. Man, when did you sleep is the question.
Yeah, I mean, there was times like, especially when we owned the restaurant, I was full time as a paramedic, so I'd work a night shift, and we were out all night, right? So, it'd be done the shift at 6 a.m. and then I'd go into the restaurant and help them prep.
Oof, yeah, that's brutal, man. Hats off to you, though, man. That's you're a better man than I could be for sure. I don't know how you could do it, but yeah, that's definitely admirable. I think paramedics and people in that emergency trauma care don't really get enough credit. It's they're front line. You guys are front line, and you deal with so much. I think it's a lot more than I'm sure you can testify to the fact that it's a lot more than medical assistance that you're providing. I'm sure. Oh yeah. I'm sure you've seen it all. I'm sure you've probably been a social worker. I'm sure you've been.
That's the main part of the job, right? Is social work.
That's what I figured. Yeah, that's what I've seen just from looking on outside in. Well, that's great. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, Jordan. And I guess you can get a little bit of rest now and to focus just entirely in your e-commerce ventures now. And that's great for you sharing that. But lastly, of course, if any of our listeners want to get a hold of you and pick your brain any more about this gated launch method, what is the best way for them to reach you?
Absolutely. So just reach out to me on LinkedIn. So if you just search Jordan West Marketer, that's where you can find me on LinkedIn. And then also you can get a hold of us at our agency at mindfulmarketing.co. So that's a good place to contact us. And if you want to learn more about how we do gated launches and how we do that for clients, that's the perfect place to go.
All right. That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Jordan. I definitely encourage our listeners to get a hold of you, take a look at your site, your brand, and see how you guys can help them out. Well, thanks again for joining us today, Jordan, on the E-Commerce Marketing Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the E-Commerce Marketing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode of the E-Commerce Marketing Podcast, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know.